Every black leader that spoke of economic development was charged with being an anti-Semite. They're very important for you to know who's the anti-Semite. Okay. Oh, here they are. Here they are. This is a list of respected blacks who have been victimized by being called black anti-Semites. And it spans the religious and political spectrum. Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey. Maybe you don't know them. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. Before I became the leading black anti-Semite, did you know that Brother Malcolm had the title? He was one of my teachers. Julian Bond, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, Andrew Young, former president of the NAACP, Kwesi Nkrumah, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Joseph Lowry, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The Black Panthers were called anti-Semitic yesterday, and the new Black Panther Party is called anti-Semitic today. The Universal Negro Improvement Association, Brother Marcus Garvey's movement, they were called anti-Semitic. Nation of Islam. But now let's go overseas. Mahatma Gandhi. Yes! Nelson Mandela. Bishop Desmond Tutu. I'm in a good list of top people here. Scholars: John Hope Franklin, J.A. Rogers, James Baldwin, Richard Wright, Julius Lester, Alice Walker. Among entertainers: Michael Jackson, Spike Lee, Ice Cube, Arsenio Hall, Muhammad Ali, Public Enemy, and they even called Oprah.
Does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl.
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country, not just my own family.
Really?
The other thing I want to point out, not all Jewish people sacrifice babies.
It's the first time I heard of any Jewish people sacrificing babies. But anyway, so you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right.
Oprah! Oprah! Now, you see, whenever a black person looks like they're going to step out of line a little bit, hit them with that anti-Semitism. They get right back in line. But guess what? They didn't stop there. Harry Truman, president. John F. Kennedy. Richard Nixon. Jimmy Carter. Gerald Ford. George H.W. Bush. And now they call our dear, beloved brother Barack Obama an anti-Semite. Now what the hell does he have in common with me? I'm on the bottom rung of the anti-Semite ladder. He's at the top. Well, who the hell else is in between? That's you. I mean, are all of us anti-Semitic? Did you know that Martin Luther King had a little Jewish problem? No, not our brother. Yeah, quoting him. When we were working in Chicago, we had numerous rent strikes on the West Side, and it was unfortunately true that in most instances, the persons we had to conduct these strikes against were Jewish landlords. We were living in a slum apartment owned by a Jew and a number of others, and we had to have a rent strike. We were paying $94 for 4 rundown, shabby rooms. And we would go out on our open housing marches on Gage Park and other places, and we discovered that whites with 5 sanitary, nice, new rooms, apartments with 5 rooms, were paying only $78 a month. We were paying 20% tax. The Negro ends up paying a color tax, and this has happened in instances where Negroes actually confronted Jews as the landlord or the storekeeper. So you can imagine when he said something like this, he was an anti-Semite. And you notice, a man wrote me this week, after the story came out, he said, Farrakhan, you say we owe you? We don't owe you nothing. You owe us. He said, I'm sending you the bill for us Jews that started the NAACP. And the money that we spent organizing you people's marches for justice and jobs, which you don't have now and never did have. Damn, I mean, look at that God. They're gonna send me the bill. Y'all all right? This is serious. They started the NAACP. Oh, let me see what Brother Malcolm said about them.
We are not going to allow ourselves to be sidetracked fighting the NAACP or fighting the Corps or fighting the Urban League or these other organizations who are headed by white people. We're not going to take time to fight them, but we do feel that when you have black organizations, they should have black leaders. An organization, for instance, like the NAACP, which is fighting for the advancement of colored people, it has had 50 presidents, or rather it has elected presidents 50 times. It's been in existence, I think, 51 years this year. And every year they elect a different president. But every president that has ever been elected by the NAACP in 51 years has been a white man. That's something to think about. A lot of people think Roy Wilkins is the president. No, he's the front man. When you it's just like Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen. A lot of people never heard of Edgar Bergen. They all they hear about is Charlie McCarthy. But that's not Charlie talking. That's Ed talking. And you know yourself that any secretary takes his instructions from the president. And the national president of the NAACP is a white man today named Spingarn. Spingarn has been president for 21 years. Why, and they elect him every year. Now, I'm not saying that this is wrong, but since the NAACP is an integration organization, and integration means something for everybody, why, I think in 50 years they should have found some Negro in there intelligent enough to become president. Now, maybe they haven't. Maybe there's no Negro in there intelligent enough to be the president. Now, we won't question that. But then if there is no Negro in the national organization of the Association for the Advancement of Colored People who is qualified to be the national president, then the NAACP has failed to cultivate leadership among our people. And if integration means that when you come together in mixing, that the white man will always be on top, then you can have integration. That's right. So why the leading organization fighting for integration today, besides the NAACP, is the Urban League, and the Urban is supposed to be a black organization, but it has a white president too. The Corps, same thing. Every time you have an integrated organization, the white man always ends up on top of it. So I'm suspicious. I'm cautious. And this is why they accuse, I guess, Mr. Muhammad of teaching black supremacy. He says black people should be on top once in a while, too. I would like to point out, too, brothers and sisters, that it's just not intelligent for a black body to have a white head. It doesn't look right. When Mexicans have an organization, they have a Mexican as the president. When Chinese have organizations, they have a Chinaman as the president. Japanese set up an organization, they set up a Japanese as its president. Jews set up an organization, they set up a Jew as the president.
The major initial apparently liberal activity of the Jewish population in relation to African Americans was in the formation of the NAACP in 1909. Much of that claim to liberalism lies in the fact that many major influential Jewish persons were among the founders of the NAACP. Some of the founders of the NAACP were not only prominent Jews, but were actually leaders of the American Zionist movement. You had the leaders of the American Zionist movement founding the NAACP. Could you imagine if Marcus Garvey had founded the ADL? Would anybody have taken Marcus Garvey seriously as a Pan-Africanist if he had founded the American Jewish Committee? They would instantly have looked at his motivation for so doing. Now we have discovered what the motivation is. Even as I speak, for the last 2 or 3 months, amazing revelations have been coming out in the press. Revelations suggesting that Joel Spingarn, the Jewish chairman of the NAACP, was actually spying on his own black NAACP membership. Spying for US military intelligence? What kind of a liberal was that? Marcus Garvey, our most perceptive leader. Brother Ilombe was talking about race first, but this is amazing. Race first, as Ilombe said, was written 20 years ago as a PhD dissertation. But in race first, there's a quotation that goes something like this. And here Garvey is talking about white liberals. He didn't zero in on Jews per se, but he was talking about the white liberals in the NAACP. Many of whom, as we know, were in fact Jews. And Garvey said that the white liberals were only about what he called disarming, disvisioning, and disambitioning the Negro, as he put it.
There's white liberals. They pose as your friend, pose as your benefactor, pose as your employer. They pose as your landlord. They pose as the neighborhood merchant. They pose as your lawyer trying to help you. They infiltrate all your organizations. And in this manner, by joining you, they strangle your militant efforts toward freedom, toward justice, and toward equality. They use integration for infiltration.
He said that the white liberals were only about removing the African from the path of self-reliance and self-determination. And then Garvey went on to make a very significant statement. He said the liberals in the NAACP were nothing but spies. These are the exact words of Garvey, quote, spies for the rest of the white race, unquote.
Hoover, the Justice Department, were clearly hooked on a fixation on Garvey, which would before long become a vendetta.
J. Edgar Hoover wrote to a colleague, "Garvey is a notorious Negro agitator, affectionately referred to by his own race as the Negro Moses."
If one wants to really see the liberalism of the whites and Jews in the NAACP, one has to look not on the fact that they founded the NAACP, one has to look at their attitude towards Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. In the UNIA, we had at the very same time the major organization in our history attempting to provide for us self-reliance and self-determination. And the white liberals, Jew and Gentile, in the NAACP targeted Marcus Garvey's effort at self-reliance as their major objective to attack. So here you find the real liberal agenda of the whites and Jews in the NAACP in the attitude to Marcus Garvey. The man, as has been said earlier, who sent Marcus Garvey to jail in his famous case in 1923 was Julian Mack. And Julian Mack wasn't only a Jew, he was also an influential member of the NAACP. At the beginning of the trial, Marcus Garvey and his lawyers asked Judge Mack to disqualify himself. Here was this man who was a member of the NAACP, which had been waging a campaign against Marcus Garvey, the Marcus Garvey must go campaign. Members of the very same NAACP had written, right around the time that Garvey was indicted, they had written a letter to the Attorney General of these United States, telling him that Garvey was a criminal, asking him to put Garvey in jail and or deport him. And here you had a representative of that very same organization sitting now in judgment over Marcus Garvey. And as Brother Ilombe said earlier, not only was Judge Mack a Jew, he was also a leader of the American Zionist movement.
After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury was called in by the eminent Jewish jurist Judge Mack and given a second set of instructions without their request. The gist of it was that if they had come back with a not guilty or hung jury, to remember the expense in which the government would be put, the public would have lost time, the court, the jury, and the witnesses would have to go through the entire exercise again. They went back into the jury room and 30 minutes later came back with a verdict. Justice is greater than the law. If justice was not included in the law, then the law would be of no use to us as human beings. What I was concerned with was the truth. I asked no mercy. I asked no sympathy. I asked for justice based on the evidence given in the courtroom. I later found out that the judge wanted to speed things up because he had an appointment with the International Zionist Convention in Chicago. It was also due to the fact that I had acquired my first set of papers for naturalization. In my closing statement, I told those 12 men that they were to judge a man by the testimony, by what had been brought into the case, by their judgment of what is wrong and what is right. You may condemn the body, but not the soul. It was not in their power to condemn the body. God condemns the soul. Judge me, and God will judge you for judging Marcus Garvey. The trial took 5.5 weeks, and every day I had a fight with the district attorney. As we went along, I realized it was impossible for me to escape the traps that were being laid out by the press, rival organizations, personal enemies, foreign governments who were interested in me being convicted. No one, not even the absent attorney, could have fought for me as I fought for myself, because he would have been risking the friendship and goodwill of the powerful influences that were aligned against me.
Over the years, many misguided people over the years have called Garvey a quote-unquote Negro Zionist. Nothing could be further from the truth. If Garvey was a quote-unquote Negro Zionist, then the Zionist judge would have let him off. You had a rare Zionist judge giving Garvey the highest possible fine, the longest possible term of imprisonment, and as if that wasn't enough, then charging him the entire costs of the trial, which was about 10 times the maximum fine. So that was a rare Zionist now dealing with the person who they call a Negro Zionist. And if you ever wanted any proof that there was nothing Zionist about Garvey's organization, here is the proof.
Did you know that the Jews that set up the NAACP, Julius Rosenthal, Lillian Wald, Rabbi Emil G. Hirsch, Rabbi Stephen Wise, and the chairman was Joel Spingarn. And Spingarn was the author of an anti-economic philanthropy specifically designed for black causes. Spingarn said that the policy of the NAACP would be non-economic liberalism. So that's why the NAACP has never started a big business, because the Jews finance it. And you can fight, you know, but here's the way you Negroes gotta fight. You fight for the right to vote. You fight to desegregate the lunch counters, the hotels, so we can have access to money that we didn't have access to under segregation. So break down the bars. Come on, Negroes. Come on and march. Sit in, kneel in, wade in. Come on, Negroes. So now you can go to the Marriott, but who owns it? You can go to the Hilton. You can go to the fine restaurants, but who owns it? You can go to the supper clubs, but who owns it? See, you have been broken as a people by a smart, crooked deceiver. Look at what Brother Malcolm said. Let me just say a word about the Jews and the black man. The Jew is always anxious to advise the black man, but he never advises him how to solve the problem the way the Jews solved their problem. Y'all love Brother Malcolm? Listen to your brother. The Jew never went sitting in, crawling in, sliding in, freedom riding, like he teaches and helps Negroes to do. The Jews stood up, the Jews stood together, and they used their ultimate power, the economic weapon. That's exactly what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is trying to teach black men to do. This is Malcolm talking before he left the nation. The Jews pooled their money and bought hotels that barred them. They bought Atlantic City. They bought Miami Beach and anything else they wanted. Who owns Hollywood? Who runs the garment industry? The largest industry in New York City. But the Jew that's advising the Negro tells him join the NAACP, CORE, the Urban League, and others. And with money donation, the Jew gains control. Then he sends the black man doing all this wading in, boring in, even burying in. Everything but buying in. Never shows him how to set up factories and hotels. Never advises him how to own what he wants. No, when there's something worth owning, the Jews have it. That's Malcolm X.
Like, see, this is my exact point that I'm making. Like, Jewish people have owned the black voice, whether it's through us wearing a Ralph Lauren shirt, or it's all of us being signed to a record label, or having a Jewish manager, or being signed to a Jewish basketball team, or doing a movie on a Jewish platform like Disney. And we understand it's like, I respect what the Jewish people have done and how they brought their people together. I want my people to rise up like the Jewish people. I'm jealous of the way Jewish people do business, and I'm jealous not just for me, but for our entire culture.
It is Jews right here in Harlem who run these whiskey stores that get you drunk. It is Jews that run these old rundown stores that sell you bad food. It is Jews who control the economy of Harlem and use it for themselves and for the benefit of Israel. And got nerve enough to walk around here joining some NAACP or CORE and think we're going to be blind to what they're doing to us. No, someone better pull their coat. Someone better pull their coat before you start pulling some heads. That's not anti-Semitic, that's just plain intelligence. You know, I was on a program here in New York on Channel 13 in which I made a statement concerning how the Jews control about 80% of the economy in most Negro communities across the country. And the Jews organized themselves and wouldn't let that thing come back on Channel 13. It was two interviews. One was done by Baldwin and one was done by me. The one I did two. One was short and one was a 30-minute derivation. 30-minute duration. And at the end of it, you remember Morgenthau jumped up and said that he's not responsible for anything I said. Well, I can understand why he said that, because during that same week, these same old so-called liberal Jews who claim they believe in free speech and all that old kind of stuff, they got together and prevented the showing of that interview again, simply because I had made the statement on that the Jews are the ones who are robbing us and exploiting us up here in Harlem and across the country. Jews believe in censorship more than anybody else. All you got to do is start talking about Jews, and you'll find all the papers will close up on you. They can't take it. They can't take any criticism. They're the most sensitive white people on this earth.
For all you Negro marchers, you remember the march in 1963 where Martin Luther King made his famous speech? Do you know who financed it? These people. Do you know the 1983 march? Do you know who financed it? Jews.
During the Civil Rights Movement, especially the early phase of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s, early 1960s, the Jewish claims to liberalism again came to the fore. The Jewish historians now tell us that something like 75%, they say, I have no reason to argue with them, they say that something like 75% of the funding for the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, for SCLC, Martin Luther King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, they now tell us that something like 75% of the funding for those organizations in the 50s and early 60s was coming from Jewish sources. 75%. They're now telling us that Martin Luther King's most influential advisor was a Jewish man by the name of Stanley Levison. They're now telling us that Stanley Levison drafted Martin Luther King's speeches. I suspect he must have drafted his books as well, because if you look at Martin Luther King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, you find a very strange attack on what he calls black anti-Semitism. So it might very well be that Levison must have helped draft that book as well. We are now told that Levison was in charge of King's finances. We are now told that Levison was King's quote-unquote chief strategist. So here you had an incredible position of power and influence in the black civil rights movement. And much of what has happened in the last 20 years in Jewish-black relations can be explained around the question of that incredible power and influence which the major Jewish organizations had during the early phase of the black civil rights movement. Because what happened when the black power movement came into being in the middle of the 1960s was that the black power movement, without necessarily focusing on Jews per se, but the black power movement, just because it insisted on self-determination and self-reliance of black people, it began to look critically at the role of white people. And again, I'm not aware that the black power movement focused in on the white people as Jews, but they began to look at the role of alien people and the incredible influence which they had within our movement. And the black power movement, thanks to people like Carlos Cooks, people like Malcolm X, people like Stokely Carmichael, now Kwame Ture, H. Rap Brown, that whole generation, Assata Shakur, that whole generation, that black power generation began to say the time had come. As Marcus Garvey said in his famous essay on African fundamentalism, the time had come for us to take control over our own affairs. And so without necessarily targeting Jews as Jews, the black power movement, insofar as it expelled white people from the movement, automatically struck a very severe blow at that incredible Jewish power which had developed within the civil rights movement.
Some of the feelings, the hurt feelings that Jews had at the point in which we felt we were being pushed out of some elements of the civil rights movement after 1966-67, when black power became a major force, I don't think I understood it then. I felt it was irrational then, and now I have a much more deep understanding of how black people could have seen us in that way. And conversely, in the Jewish world today, you have an awful lot of people using that pushing away that blacks did as the excuse, just like they use anti-Semitism in the black world, something that I have absolutely no sympathy with and will not tolerate. But nevertheless, They use that anti-Semitism in the black world as their excuse to fit into American society and abandon Jewish values, the Jewish values of caring, of justice, of love thy neighbor, of love the stranger. And they're using, there's a section of conservative Jews who want to, politically conservative Jews, who want to use that reality of anti-Semitism amongst a small sector of blacks as the excuse for saying, let's give up on all this social justice orientation. Let's forget about our alliance with liberal and progressive causes. Let's take care of our own narrow self-interest, which means less taxes, less social programs, and to hell with the poor.
And my suspicion is that once the Jewish establishment realized from the mid-60s on that they could no longer direct the black struggle from within, they seem to have taken a strategic decision that the next best thing was to try to destroy it from without. And so from the late 1960s on, you find a whole string of incidents bearing out my thesis. You had the Ocean Hill-Brownsville business back in 1968 in Brooklyn, where the Jewish teachers and the Jewish community generally destroyed the efforts of black parents to control the curriculum of their own schools, to control the education of their own children. You had the Baki case, among other cases. The Baki case is the most well-known of several court cases. In the Baki case, it was 1977, where you had a white man in California challenging the whole concept of quotas for black students in medical school. The case didn't involve Jews. The major Jewish organizations, the Anti-Defamation League, American Jewish Committee, American Jewish Congress, they inserted themselves into the case. The case didn't concern them. They voluntarily entered the case as so-called friends of the court to argue, to file briefs, and to argue against the concept of affirmative action quotas for black people. Here you had major Jewish organizations representing Jewish people who today are the recipients of perhaps the largest reparations in history. The Jewish state of Israel has received billions of dollars in reparations from Germany over the last few decades, billions of dollars. And here were black people struggling to maintain the absolute minimal reparations, a few quotas in medical school. And here were the recipients of the world's greatest reparations in history, entering into this Baki case to destroy even that little modicum of reparations that black people were getting via a few little extra places in medical school. You had the Dubé case, which Milombe mentioned earlier, at Stony Brook, where the South African professor gave his class a series of essays. One of the essays was Zionism as racism, which at the time was a very topical question. It was being debated. In fact, the United Nations, I believe, actually passed a resolution to that effect.
We reject Zionism as a racist, expansionist ideology in its manifestations.
Le résultat du vote est le suivant. 72 voix pour, 35 voix contre, 32 abstentions. Le projet de résolution est adopté.
It was a very topical academic issue at that point. All the man did was to insert this among a whole list of possible essay topics. The result, he lost his job. You had the case of Andrew Young in 1979, the darling of the integrationist, traditionally pro-Jewish establishment. And even Andrew Young fell victim to Jewish wrath in this period. Andrew Young was the US ambassador to the United Nations. Here was a US ambassador to the United Nations trying to mediate a problem between Jews and Palestinians. And he decided, as any rational person would do, that the only way to mediate a problem between two people is to talk to both of them. He had a meeting with the PLO. The result was that he lost his job.
So I think The black community and the Jewish community have traditionally worked together, will continue to work together in spite of differences. I think that right now black leaders are meeting and will be attempting to meet with leaders in the Jewish community. They will also attempt, as I am attempting, to channel any frustration and rage over this situation into constructive patterns of our working together. The issue right now is not Jews and blacks. The issue really is the Middle East. So black leaders have a vested interest in settling this conflict, but in no way should that ever be seen as being anti-Jewish. It may be pro-Palestinian in a way that it was not before, in which case the Jewish community will have the responsibility of finding a way to relate to that without being anti-black.
Around the same time that Andrew Young had his meeting with the PLO, a Jewish U.S. ambassador to Austria, a man named Wolf, also met with the PLO. Did he lose his job? No, of course not. He was a Jew, he could do what he wanted. Andrew Young was judged by a different standard. He wasn't supposed to do what the Jews didn't like, even though the Jews could do what the Jews didn't like. But Andrew Young, as a black man, couldn't do what the Jews didn't like. You had the ongoing situation of Crown Heights. I recall, and I'm sure everybody here in this room is much more familiar than I am with the case. I think it was in the 70s where the young black man was killed by Jewish vigilantes in Crown Heights. Of course, you had the more recent situation in Crown Heights again over the last couple of years.
Why has there been trouble the last 3 nights? Why do you think?
Because
it's a long
I'll tell you why. Because it's been a death, and no one is in jail. It's no justice. What would happen if it was the other way around? A black man would have been driving that car and hit 2 Jewish kids. The problem is, an ambulance came and they're just gonna take the driver and leave 2 little kids. I mean, those are children, man.
When we lose a life, we're still being victimized. I'm sorry. We're still being victimized with 2 lives, 1 destroyed and 1 lost. And we're still the victims because we haven't been served justice. Crown Heights, between the Jews and the black people in this community, there's been a growing heated tension for years growing in this community, and it now exploded. It just exploded.
What's the reason behind the tension you're talking about?
Racism. Racism.
Even Nelson Mandela was not exempt from Jewish wrath in this period. When Nelson Mandela came here to New York in 1990, on Ted Koppel's Nightline show, I distinctly recall Ted Koppel telling Nelson Mandela that he better go along with the Jewish agenda or risk losing support in America. And that in itself was a very revealing statement from Ted Koppel. Because what Koppel was saying in effect was that we Jews, he was saying, have the power in this country to deny you aid unless you go along with our agenda. That is what Koppel was in fact saying. It is not what he precisely articulated, but if you read between the lines, that is what he was saying. And Mandela, all praises due to him, had the courage, the strength to tell Ted Koppel on international TV, Mr. Koppel, he said, your enemies are not my enemies.
One of the mistakes which some political analysts make is to think that their enemies should be our enemies.
Some controversial things, not the kinds of things necessarily that a very political man says. If you were very political, you might have been more concerned about not alienating some people in this country who have it within their hands, within their power, either to continue sanctions against South Africa or to raise those sanctions, to lift them. Why were you not a little more political? Perhaps we're too accustomed to politicians in this country.
I do not understand what you mean. Perhaps if you clarify what you are referring to, I may be in a position to comment.
What I'm saying is that in this country, for example, there has been for many years a close alliance between the Jewish population and the black population in the civil rights struggle. There is likely to be a rather negative reaction to some of the things that you have said. That reaction could very well cause people to call up their congressmen, their senators, and say, go ahead, lift the sanctions.
By some strange coincidence, Jesse Jackson was sitting in the front seat as this exchange was going on between Ted Koppel and Mr. Mandela. And I remember sitting by my TV and looking intently at the face of Jesse Jackson and wondering what was going through his mind and if perhaps he was learning something he didn't know before, something about dignity and self-respect. Of course, Jesse himself is another example of this incredible Jewish onslaught against black folk for the last 20 years. In both of his presidential campaigns, Jesse Jackson was harassed by the Jewish community. In fact, the Jews became perhaps his largest single opponents during both of his campaigns.
The U.S. must be concerned with Palestinian justice and Israeli security, Lebanon's legal authority, and normalize relations with Arab states. There will be no peace on one side until there is justice on both. We do not seek to exchange sufferers, but to stop suffering. Just and lasting peace is inextricably bound for a state for Palestinian people, and the recognition of the PLO as the government in exile with which our nation must negotiate. The PLO must have equal opportunity to communicate in America.
That the basic Middle East policies of our government, as it has been of every administration in the last 30 years, is based on the simple premise that strong support for the security of Israel is in the interest of the United States. Now, we can quarrel about a detail here and there, but that's the basic premise. And only as long as we can keep the American people believing that, will the so-called Jewish lobby seem to have its way. But once the American people don't support it, that's it.
I suggest to you that if it were a more dominant ethnic group where the competition for power existed, that the use of American weapons in Lebanon, the extent to which they have been used, would have been protested, would have been stopped. There are just literally too few politically active Arab Americans to, in fact, counterbalance that policy. If that were American weapons being used to that extent in Africa, the rage in American blacks would have neutralized that policy in a greater measure. Which means that once we use ethnic politics, those who are the strongest, most organized, most vocal, tend to have their will. Those that are the smallest may not. And that comes to the whole question of the integrity and the strength of the executive office, in fact. Because on this arrangement, it becomes, kind of Darwinian, the survival of the fittest, and the biggest lion in the jungle devours everybody. And therefore, I think that when we set certain precedents, then we do in fact jeopardize national security.
Now the ADL has jumped on Kanye West because he said black people don't have the same level of connections as Jewish people. Black people don't have the same connection as oil people, quote. Did he lie? No, he told the truth. And the ADL, Mr. Foxman, issued a press release on the 2nd day of December 2013. And this executive director said, quote, if the comments are true as reported, this is classic anti-Semitism. There it goes again. The age-old canard that Jews are all-powerful. No, you're not all-powerful, but you certainly are powerful. And you control the levers of government. You don't want to admit it. But as a celebrity, you're telling Kanye West he should know better. He does know better, and that's why he said what he said. Then you said to him, we hope that he would take responsibility for his words, understand why they are so offensive, and apologize to those he has offended. You know what, Mr. Foxman? I wish you and I could have a dialogue. You wouldn't put that small-time stuff over on me that you put on scared to death Negroes, that if they mention Jew and you call them anti-Semitic, they start bowing to you and your pressure. Kanye West, don't bow to the pressure to apologize to anybody. You said nothing wrong.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of y'all no more. And we don't have to be afraid. I understand that they got us so paid off every which way, they cutting down. And my whole point just off the tweet, the fact that, what does that even mean, what I said? And the fact that I got taken off proves my point. Jamie Lee Curtis went on TV and said, I hope they take his children away from him. Wow. I hope they take his children away from him. Everybody they put out, Triple X, Tupac, that's what Larry was saying. Right. My response was, well, I guess I'm next then. Right. Because it's no backing down at this point. I talked to Cube because Cube been labeled an anti-Semite. First of all, we are Semite. We right. Jew. So I can't be anti-Semite. Right. First of all, I need my 4 stadiums back. Now I'm gonna say some anti-Semitic shit. I'ma fuck your bitch. I'ma kill this nigga. I'ma fuck your bitch. I'ma kill this nigga. That's the real anti-Semitic shit that the Jewish people get paid off of.
This was an ancient, Brother Oh God, was an old statement that was a mantra among slave masters when we were on the plantation in 1555 all the way through 1865 and beyond. Listen to this mantra that slave masters had. Nigga sing, nigga dance, nigga jump, or nigga die. In other words, sing for me, dance for me, jumps, play a sport for me, and if you're not going to be singing or dancing or playing a sport for me, the only thing I want you to become good at is being dead or dealing death. And when you look at the world today, you find that the only fields of human endeavor that Black people are allowed to express their Black excellence in without hindrance and suppression is in the world of sport, play, and entertainment. Other than that, we deal in death. So what happens to a young mind that sees that the only people that have the great wealth, the great success, the great fortune, the great fame are coming up in these 3 areas: dancing, singing, sport, or dealing death? Guess what they do? They take the genetic power, their greatness that is built in their DNA, and they channel it toward the areas that they know that they will be allowed to be successful in without hindrance and suppression by the gatekeepers, or in this case, the executives of the music industry. So you might have an artist that shows up, but there's 100 other artists that's just as good as the one that shows up. But who does the executive pick? They don't pick the conscious version of, they don't pick the revolutionary artist. They don't pick the one that has social commentary that will reshape the way people think. They pick the one that is going to promote the disrespect, degradation, and destruction of Black people. And they say, here, you come in, we'll give you the deal and put millions behind you and make you popular.
The toxicity put in our music is nothing promoting the idea of a king taking care of a queen and then taking care of the future kings and the future queens. It's just us talking about killing each other and Jewish people getting paid off of it.
So reality is this: music, or the artists that are rapping, they are reflecting and representing what goes on in the hood. But hell, I don't need you to use your gift, skill, or talent and your poetic wordplay to show me all the negatives that I've been looking at all my whole life. Right. No, when you get a gift like that from God, there's no school you can go to learn how to put wordplay together like Lil Wayne or Drake or Jay-Z. You can't, there ain't no school that can teach you that. God gave them that. And he didn't give them this skill set for them to reflect reality. He gave them the skill set that they could use that power to change the reality that we live in. So in that sense, yes, there is 1,000, I don't want to put a name out there because I don't want to belittle my brothers. But whoever's the best artist that is the negative artist that's at the top of the game right now, there's another 1,000 of them just like him, but some of them have commentary that would resurrect and redeem our people. They don't give them the deals. They only give the one the deal that's going to promote the foolishness.
But what I'm doing is I'm Me Tooing the Jewish culture. The Jewish community, especially in the music industry, they'll take, in the entertainment period, they'll take one of us, the brightest of us, right, that can really feed a whole village, and they'll take us and milk us till we die, and then Stevie Wonder's son got to get a job.
Did you know, Brother Oh God, that Tupac, whenever they did the song Two of America's Most Wanted, that in the commentary at the end, Tupac said he made a statement. He said, after we get finished with these black bees, we can go after these Jewish hoes. Do you know they made him edit that out?
Wow. Not surprised.
They told him you can say black bees, but you can't say Jewish hoes. When Michael Jackson made the song, They Don't Really Care About Us, he said, sue me, Jew me, you will never do me. They've made Sony recall millions of albums to take the word Jew out. So what is it that you can't say negative Jew, but every song we can make can whoop a nigga, kill a nigga? We can always degrade ourselves, but we can't degrade no other nationality of people. Who set up and who controls that narrative? Think of that for a second. So this is an industry that is controlled by gatekeepers that do not care for the good of the rise of us as a people. They want us to continue to use the gift, skill, and talent that God gave us to reinforce nigger culture and nigger life. Because a black man or a woman functioning like that is a non-threatening entity to white supremacy and a power structure that exists.
I got to tell you something. Where is a black guy that has a Jewish person signed to him? Point it out. Tell me that. Where is a black person that's signed to a Jewish person? All of them. Basically 90% of them. So what I'm saying is, y'all done poked the bear too many times. Y'all should have learned with Drake. Y'all should have learned with Puff. Y'all should have learned with Hove. Y'all dealing with a different kind of animal here. You know, everybody wants to say I'm 730. Well, I'm going to use that to my advantage. I told y'all I was the leader. I told y'all I'm going to free my people in the name of God, and I will put my life at risk.
You know, Kanye West is a good conversation piece right now to kind of go to, because we've seen him throughout the years, but just recently, Kanye West as a whole, he said some things that people deem to be anti-Semitic. Now, we've had numerous conversations about that conversation on this platform, and we see a lot of people upset about the anti-Semitic or the anti-Semitism he's been quote unquote spewing, but we ask ourselves, what exactly did he say to deem it anti-Semitic? So can you just break down the term anti-Semitic and why, when it comes to when we as a people just have opposition toward the powers that be, and most of the time that happens to be people from the Jewish community, why they seem so hell-bent on not only calling us anti-Semitics, but just not even having a conversation around, hey, these brothers seem to be claiming that they are the true children of Jerusalem, the true Jewish people. They never want to have that conversation. Can you kind of expound on that?
Well, it is a simple view of the dictionary of the word Semite, and it speaks of a Semite being one of an Afro or African origin or of the Arab population. So in that context, we are the real Semites. So to be anti-Semitic means to be anti-yourself. The thing that happens is they use this term as a way of muzzling and shutting people and putting you really into a social prison by which you will never have a platform to express yourself. Do you know that Oprah Winfrey has been called anti-Semitic? Did you know that Martin Luther King was labeled anti-Semitic. Frederick Douglass was labeled anti-Semitic. Desmond Tutu was named anti-Semite. Mandela was labeled an anti-Semite. Look up the names. If the list is so long, anybody that's ever stood up, Marcus Garvey was labeled anti-Semitic. So most of the times when it comes to black people, anybody that does or tries to promote something good for us as a people, they find a way to twist it and make it against them. It's a magic trick that they're performing. One of the things that should be looked at is when Kanye West made the statement and he said, I think that I'm going DEFCON 3 or something. So look up what DEFCON 3 stands for.
Yes, sir.
It is a military maneuver wherein you are putting yourself in a position not of offensive against something, but in defensive and being prepared for whatever they've got coming for you.
My question for you is, do you now regret saying DEFCON 3 on Jewish people? Are you sorry you said that?
No.
I think it matters. You should be.
Absolutely not.
Go to Reuters. Let's go to graphic 5 here. Kanye West's Twitter, Instagram accounts restricted after alleged anti-Semitic posts.
Just please, man, be journalists. Don't be cowards.
I mean, it is unbelievable. Like, what exactly would someone need to say for Reuters to determine that it's not alleged anti-Semitism, that it's just anti-Semitic? What would he need to say? Apparently, declaring DEFCON 3 on Jewish people is not enough. Alleged. We don't know. Yeah. You decide.
What does DEFCON 3 mean?
It's like level of,
like, you know, actually when it's DEFCON,
it's like nuclear war shit.
I spelled it wrong. I have a tendency to do like DEFCON is actually that you're preparing to protect yourself, because that's what I did years ago.
I'm sorry. What you
hey, I'm talking about.
Right.
But ain't nobody listening to me type shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm in like a glass box of like celebrity with a bunch of handlers around me and shit. And people colluding behind my back and being like, is he ramped up? What we gonna say now? I'm gonna let y'all know right now, the devil is a defeated foe. You can't poison me. And by the way, y'all done already fuck with me so much. Y'all already black mirrored me. You already made everybody think I'm crazy. You already took my family away. You already separated all my friends. I don't got no celebrity friends.
But I mean, I want to be careful with this subject because.
Wait a second, but tell me, could you even really run this interview? Because Mav didn't run my interview.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They blocked me out. The Jewish media blocked me out. This shit lit, right? I'm lit, right? I'm lit. I'm lit. You know what I'm saying? JP Morgan, I put $140 million into JP Morgan, and they treated me like shit. So if JP Morgan Chase is treating me like that, how they treating the rest of y'all?
That's outrageous, yeah.
It's just, it's up. You know, they done fuck with me too long. Every time they say my name wrong, it's like they calling me Cassius. My name Ali.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Anti-Semitic?
You've many of the things that I've read about you, and you've made a mention a couple of times about the Jews and everything, and I'm wondering if you are personally anti-Semitic.
No. How can I be anti-Semitic when the Arabs are half the Muslim world is Semitic? If I was anti-Semitic, I'd be anti-Arab and anti-everything else. No, I think that in this country, there's one mistake that the Jews make. They put themselves in a position where whenever anybody gives an objective analysis of the role that they play, they defend themselves by accusing you of being anti-Semitic. And a Negro is not anti-Semitic when he says that the man who's exploiting him in his community is white, because it is a white man who owns all the stores. Now, is it an accident that these whites who own these stores are Jewish? If it's an accident, then the fact that he says the Jew on the corner is exploiting me isn't an anti-Semitic statement. It's just more descriptive of the man who's exploiting him.